Okay, let's go ahead. Bring this meeting of Templeton Community Services District Fire and Emergency Management Committee to order. Today is December 10th, 3 p.m. Roll call, please.
Paxton.
Here.
Bardonish.
Here.
And Morrison.
Here. Okay. Let's go to the agenda. The first item is fireworks enforcement update.
Yeah, so we put this item on this committee's agenda just to provide some context for some of the things that you've been discussing and we've been working towards, and provide a quick update. We kind of are looking for a little direction today. So as you know, over the past several months, it was determined that Templeton CSD could create our own administrative citation program for illegal fireworks, provided that it was in no way more stringent than the county's ordinance. And we're somewhat limited because we are in an unincorporated community within a county that does have illegal fireworks enforcement actions. So we have drafted an ordinance that's modeled after the county's to the T. And we were prepared to put that on the board's December 16th board meeting agenda for consideration. Then late Thursday of last week, we were informed by Chief Deputy Nate Paul, who's attended a couple of your meetings here recently. And he, as you know, he is on the countywide fireworks team. He informed us that they had just concluded their administrative hearings for the fireworks enforcement citations that were issued based on the 4th of July this year. And you may recall, none of those were in Templeton specifically, but they were countywide. And the way the county ordinance works is if a person would receive an administrative citation, they had the right to request a hearing. I don't recall the final numbers, but or of how many citations were issued, but I believe 8 hearings were requested. And of the 8 hearings, 7 were overturned. In other words, not upheld by the hearing officer. So Chief Paul suggested that we maybe just take that into consideration, and he felt that the county's fireworks team would be reconvening, and that that there may be some problems with the process. He cited the ordinance, but the process in general that led to some of these challenges with getting the violations to be upheld. And so kind of a warning to, just kind of be cautious. Then our legal counsel, David Hirsch, reached out to county counsel, and today we heard back from county counsel who can essentially confirm that yes, there were a number of problems with the ones that went to hearing. The county counsel didn't necessarily feel it was a problem with the ordinance itself, but there were some particular facts that led to some of the hearings those items not being upheld. So all that is to say, we don't know with certainty if the county ordinance will change. But the issue is, if the county ordinance changes in any way, we most likely will need to change our ordinance if it were adopted by then. And the process of amending or changing the ordinance is the same as implementing it originally. It takes 2 readings, 30 days. So the issue really is, while we have the ordinance drafted, the options are we can move forward with recommending it for adoption on Tuesday, although I don't have a staff report written for that item. Knowing that there's a chance that it's going to have to be amended in the near future, very near future, if the county makes any amendments to its program. Or we can hold off a month or two, get some further feedback from the county about whether or not there are going to be changes seen in their ordinance that we can learn from. The issue is we really have to have this at least introduced by April at the latest, because again, it takes 2 readings and 30 days. And ideally we'd have this done before then so that we could be, as prepared as possible for this next July 4th, and the public and our staff would know the process that we're going to follow to proceed with administrative citations. So that's kind of where we are. Again, that's just kind of up to the minute in terms of the feedback that we're receiving from the county. So from the ops side or the sheriff's department, like, whoa, kind of maybe hold on. There's maybe some challenges here that you might want to learn from, and from the legal side, more of a defense of how the ordinance is drafted now. And I don't know how soon the county's fireworks team is gonna reconvene, but it sounded like that was imminent.
All right, thank you. Any questions?
If, for instance, they were to impose more lax enforcement and ours would be more strict, does that nullify our?
Yeah, I mean, according to the law, the strict interpretation of the law, yes, it would. Ours cannot be, it really says, I mean, I think we're interpreting this to say, as long as ours is not more strict, these citations should be upheld. But if it is not, I think it presents a problem. If ours is different than the county's, and certainly more strict, then we may have a problem with being able to utilize our ordinance effectively.
Yeah, is there a possibility that we could have somebody on their fireworks committee, or is it only strictly for?
I don't know, that'd be great, that's a great suggestion. We'll make that inquiry as to whether or not we can kind of more directly participate.
Because it seems like it'd be ideal to align with what they're doing. I mean, I think that's the intent right now, is to align with what the county is doing. It might be just premature or extra work that's unnecessary to push it forward right now. If they're gonna make a change.
I guess my biggest concern is I want to, for transparency and to eliminate confusion. I don't want to proceed with something that's maybe known that's going to change and we just have to amend it or immediately before we even use it. This is all focused on the 4th of July. Now, I realize that technically if the ordinance were in place in February and we caught somebody with a firework, we could utilize it, but the intent here is to get this all situated for the 4th of July. So I think, yeah, we'd like to minimize any confusion as the board processes this, and certainly amongst our teams about how we're gonna go, the process we're gonna go through with utilizing a new tool. It's not simple. I mean, even the county's ordinance requires, pretty thorough documentation, I mean, to survive these hearings, we're gonna have some, not a suspicion that a firework was lit off at that location, but yeah, we saw it. It doesn't have to meet a criminal standard, but nonetheless a standard that would survive a hearing.
Yeah, so the one that was found and was founded and they were cited, what was the difference? I think that's,
I don't know. I mean, it's not like we got some examples, but they were like,
find out what it is.
we're all gonna be pretty fact specific, but I don't know what the potential changes to the county ordinance might be, but I think you also heard the same kind of caution from Chief Deputy Paul at the last meeting. Says, we still feel like there's some improvements that could be made in the county ordinance, but at the time we still don't really know what those might be.
I think some of the details were missing a little bit with regards to what they shared with us, but I mean, a couple of examples were one of the appellants basically said they were sleeping. There's no way they could have,
Hosted the party.
The second one had their video surveillance from their Ring camera that showed there was no party in their front yard. And I don't know what the other ones were, but if these are situations where, it's a matter of opinion and, the deputy provided evidence or whatever on their side and it wasn't valid enough, well, then those should be thrown out. But it would be incumbent upon us to make sure that we've got the evidence before we write the citation.
So that means that the ordinance may not change.
It could,
Just
that's
as you
right.
mentioned, the
Yes.
attorney.
We don't know if it. So the issue, I don't think there's a problem waiting another couple months, except for it leads to this sort of period of uncertainty as you go through other issues like, okay, what are we doing about it? We have something prepared. If we decide to kind of hold off a month or two to see if the county does in fact amend its ordinance, or we get at least some initial feedback. And maybe the feedback is, no, the group has met and it's more of a procedural issue we've got to kind of clean up on our end and not necessarily with the legislation itself. Then we can learn from that and proceed with introducing the ordinance. But again, I think if there's the process to amend it is identical to getting it originally approved. And so you could be doing this twice.
And then obviously this is only for the fire, because we allow the fireworks. This is what we because we have to go through it because we allow the fireworks.
No, actually, you could go through this even if you didn't allow
Yeah.
fireworks, if you wanted to be involved in the enforcement, if you wanted to use an administrative citation. So even if you did not allow safe and sane fireworks, you still have the right to use administrative citations if you, through this kind of ordinance.
Correct.
It's not, one's not conditional.
Yeah, City of Atascadero doesn't allow fireworks, period. But they have an administrative citation program for illegal burning, for code enforcement violations, for burn piles, for fireworks. So anything within their municipal code or anything within our municipal code, if we adopt this, we can write a citation for it if it's outside of our municipal code.
Okay, so I see.
So weed abatement. I mean, if we have somebody that we missed on the actual weed abatement inspections and they refuse to cut their property, well, we can cite them with this administrative ordinance or citation.
Well, I understand the possibility of delaying it, and we don't want to do the work. But I know at the last meeting, we've had several meetings and some things have come up in terms of, enforcement, what we want to do, how things would work out financially, how things would be covered, so. I'm not, I think we also need to make a decision on the fireworks itself.
So that's separate.
That's separate, so,
This
but,
is only on the administrative citation ordinance, so
Okay.
okay, let me try to clarify this. The district, 2 years ago, we knew we'd have to be adopting a new fire code.
okay, yes,
We have, that is in draft form and is slated to be on the December 16th agenda. Within the fire code adoption are the safe and sane fireworks rules. So all the rule changes that you discussed back in September are incorporated into that draft, and that will be on the agenda on December 16th for the board. This is the administrative citation program, which was a separate ordinance
okay, yes.
altogether. So the safe and sane fireworks matters are on the December 16th agenda, and that should be published by tomorrow.
Okay,
It was just gonna be too cumbersome to be able to try and put this administrative citation
Yeah.
onto the actual code adoption. That would have been a nice neat package, but
okay, so that's why I guess
Yeah.
I'm.
So
I know originally we were trying to put it all together, so we decided to.
Yeah, our legal counsel really wanted this to sort of stand alone,
Okay,
so it's drafted separately, can be considered separately.
okay,
It all ends up the same place at the end of the day, but the fire code adoption, including the safe and sane rules, are on December, they will be on the December 16th agenda.
okay, I get it. Thank you for explaining. Appreciate it. Just go to public, any questions from public?
Not a question, but a couple of comments.
Yes.
First off, thank you. You did a pretty good job of succinctly summarizing the issue. I had heard about the citations being overturned, and to be completely honest with you, those of us in the industry are shocked because particularly that rate it's unheard of. We have initiated a public records request through the county. We'd like to see all the citations that were issued. We'd like to see why they were overturned, because something's clearly wrong in their process. We don't like illegal fireworks, even in cities where we don't sell fireworks. They're just bad for us. I saw at an event 3 out of the 5 supervisors for the county just last week, and mentioned to one of them the citation issue. They don't know anything about it at this point in time, and they certainly did not indicate that they were anticipating reopening and strengthening and changing their fireworks ordinance. So I don't know if that's reached them from their task force position or not yet, but I'm just throwing that out that at this point in time, 3 of the supervisors were not didn't seem like fireworks were again on their radar. One of the things, my main reason for coming here today was to hopefully have a little bit of an opportunity to talk to the board member, the committee here. There is something that we think that we can help out with if you do proceed to continue to allow the sale of safe and sane fireworks, and separate from the administration site issues that you're bringing up. But there is something we do in other communities where we take a little bit of the problem off of your shoulders We have a pretty robust public safety and education campaign that we can bring to a community. If you go forward with fireworks, and I know that part of the conversation at the board level, when you voted the 3-2 to continue, was how do we get after illegals and how do we educate? I'd love to be able to put a plan together, bring it to either, I'm not sure if it'd be the board, or the general manager, or the fire chief, and say, look, if you continue, this is what we can do and we can solve some of your headaches. You don't need to create a PSA. We've got PSAs that we can air, that we can talk about, how to dispose of legal fireworks. We've got other cities where we put specific signage on the booths with, now it's a QR code that lead them to safety and education literature. We can put your stuff on that QR code. What I'm saying is you don't need to always recreate the wheel. We've got some of these that we can do, and we absolutely would commit to doing it to you folks. If we have the opportunity, I'm not sure either before your 16th meeting, obviously time is short at this point, or afterwards, that give us an opportunity, I'm saying us, meaning give the industry, not just me, because Phantom Fireworks is of course a part of this conversation as well, but let us show you some of the things that we've already created that we can do that will save you time and effort and money in the long run, because clearly if you're paying somebody to come up with a poster, hey, here's a couple posters we've got, which one works for you, and let us take it to the printer for you. We've done in other cities where we've done this mainly in cities where that have just recently opened for fireworks. But if you're thinking of changing and being more strict, that kind of covers it, is where we've done some specific mailers, where we go to this point where we'll say we'll mail into every house in the district a flyer talking about the enhanced enforcement efforts, things like that you're doing. All I'm saying is we can put together a package for you so that you're not wasting your time, effort, and resources. You don't have to take what we're offering. You can take and choose like a buffet, but we do that for just as close here as in Lompoc. And I don't know, one of the things that we do is the only statewide safety and education program on legal fireworks is done through the fireworks stands. And we also have a program that we do through the schools that we can certainly talk to. TEF is one of our customers. Why aren't we taking literature, and why aren't we starting at the schools and letting them know what is and what isn't legal? So I'm just saying there's things that other cities done. I'd love to put together a program, let you guys take a look at it and say, we don't need the guy from the industry, throw him out. Or, hey, why do I want General Manager Briltz, who doesn't have anything to do after 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Why do we want him? We'll give him the job to create it. So that's why I just wanted to offer that to you folks in a public forum.
Okay, thank you. All right, bring it back to any other comments? So bring it back to the committee, questions or directions? I think you mentioned that you think it's probably better wait on this item.
I mean, I guess my recommendation on this would be if they're gonna change it, instead of putting the effort and time into, would be to try to align more. See if there's an opportunity for somebody to be on the committee, just so they're right there knowing and communicating, closely back with you.
Yeah, I think it's a good suggestion, and that's kind of what we're poised to do. Is when we got this news, is let's not put more effort in right now. I guess I just want to make sure you acknowledge then that it's going to be we're going to be a month or two later than the fire code adoption, but we can still have this in place certainly well before the 4th of July. I've kind of thought, hey, really probably by February we need to get this introduced, just so that there's clarity and amongst the expectations, and there's no risk of it not being in full effect.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I think you agree there. Okay, all right, good.
Yeah.
All right, we'll wait. Thank you. The next item is update on potential partnership opportunities. I guess opportunity with City of Atascadero for fire.
Yeah, so it's your last committee meeting. You reviewed. We talked about what some of the succession opportunities or options are for replacing our fire chief when he retires, which looks like sometime in 2026. So that's soon-ish. And you also reviewed a number of options about how we can utilize the resources we have, the money we have to put as much behind the boots on the ground, so to speak, or the resources that are able to respond. And you looked at several options. So several of the options that were presented were dependent on a lower cost alternative for filling this sort of fire administration role. And there's been some, conceptual discussions between Chief Peterson and Chief Bryson and Atascadero about what they might be able to do. I met with the city manager of Atascadero today and just briefly discussed kind of, where we were and what their interest is and et cetera. And he committed to evaluating the request. It sounds like it's really dependent on whether or not they believe they'd have to hire another person. They do have some desires to bolster their service. If after reviewing, what they think they can provide and what we think we need, they decide they need to hire another full-time person, it's probably not a cost advantage to us to go with Atascadero. Their costs are going to be similar, perhaps even higher, to fill that role. And he committed to kind of being able to respond within about a month. So sometime in January, we should know if this is worthy of further investment, time and effort. In the meantime, we'll continue to kind of assemble our, list of what's necessary and what we'd like to have, et cetera. Make sure that, when we're talking about the services, we're in agreement about what those are include.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we're at. It's not off the table, but it's not something that we can just bank on at this point, as far as being a viable option.
All right. Any questions from the committee? Public, any questions on that? Comments? Okay, all right, come back. So this was just update.
Just informational. We'll keep you informed as we move forward. And again, if we can get some, if we can make some progress, then we'll have some numbers that we can begin to kind of plug in and see what that works, what that means. We know what it costs us to provide the service by having a full-time employed fire chief. We don't know what the city of Atascadero might charge to replicate some of those services, and that's kind of where we're at. But they're not, it's not like, no, we're not interested in helping you. It's more like it's got to work for both parties.
And then, okay, all right, so we'll figure that. All right, thank you, appreciate it. The next item is the AP Triton Master Plan Assessment Update.
So just by way of background here, the district hired AP Triton in 2021 to conduct what was then a master plan for the district's fire department. That was a kind of an extensive several-month effort that resulted in this report that we can walk you through. At the time the district accepted it, you may recall that the board accepted it, but only as a portion of the master plan at request, and that we refer to it as an assessment. And so that's what we did. We filled in some blanks with some other work products to complete our master plan. If you go to the district's webpage and you click on the final master plan, this is a component of it. There's also some cost estimates for the fire station expansion and a few other components that make up the entire master plan. But this was the work product that was that AP Triton assessment. And earlier this year, the board adopted a goal, and one of our strategic plan. One of the goals was to review all of the master plans. And so this component was primarily placed on the agenda to review the prior work that was done. And it's a fairly comprehensive document. We didn't expect to go through it page by page with you, but we're happy to just review the sections. It concludes with a number of recommendations, and at the time we prepared responses to those recommendations. Many of the recommendations we concurred with. Some we felt needed some context or maybe weren't things that we would pursue right away for various reasons. And we could review some or all of those recommendations and those responses. And then in some cases there's some updates, or not necessarily public updates, but we can update the committee on the status of the recommendations if it's something you'd like to go through. So, you know, that's what we've got for you tonight, or today, still today. So again, this was initially prepared in the summer of 2021. There is an executive summary, there's community overview. This went through a number of things about our structure and general operations. There was some review of revenues and expenditures and capital improvements, or a need for capital improvement program, really. There was a discussion on staffing and how the department was managed. A review of the facilities, the fire department facilities and apparatus, and then the service delivery models and how we utilize our resources. And then the description of some other programs that we were involved with, and evaluation of community risk. And then there's some very specific findings and recommendations. So, I mean, we can go through this as quickly as or as thoroughly as you'd like, or we can scroll down to the actual recommendations that were listed and our response at the time, and maybe spend more time at this meeting reviewing any potential updates if you'd like. But again, I'm happy to, if you'd like a more thorough review, we can do that as well. Again, this was something that was requested by the board of directors.
There's about 17 recommendations.
Yeah.
Back of that, and the general manager and I put together responses, as you probably remember, from those. I have updates for about 10 of them, so if you want me to just go through those updates, that's fine too, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I've read through this, so yeah, okay, yeah. So like some of the updates, some of the changes, like, I don't know, do you have a like update on closely monitor the revenue to expenditure ratio?
No, just the response on that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so this has already been accomplished through the regular monthly and annual review, including annual audit, budget and actual reports. Additionally, Fire and Emergency Services Management Committee review the actual expenditures and revenues as compared to the 10-year financial model. So nothing's really changed on that one.
Okay.
On number one, evaluate the adoption of cost recovery for certain services. It's just, you know, we ran through several options there. The options for this recommendation have been investigated and have shown to be of little to no financial benefit. That was the whole aspect of trying to reach out to insurance companies and bill for service, that type of thing. So every time we tried to reach out, we were just running into dead ends with regards to being able to do that.
Yeah, you were telling me even to put in, use the software programs and everything like that, it was just gonna be so costly that it just didn't.
Correct. Yep. Development, a department-specific capital improvement program. So the fire station expansion, we've got the response there and we're in the process of that, but the fire station expansion plan is underway. And I will get into that on the, actually the fire station expansion item in more detail. But that's underway, and we did get comments back on that, and I'll get into that in more detail. The new fire engine has been purchased, and pre-construction meeting with Pierce Manufacturing is scheduled for March of 26. So that's kind of the update on that one. 3, 4, 5. 5. So we talked about that is reduced call processing time. With the new dispatch center opening, with county fire staff and their operations moving in there, we've seen, not much, but a noticeable difference with regards to at least communications, which has been better until the sheriffs get in there and we actually start seeing that across the hall communication and or see some changes with regards to what's called MedCom dispatching, to the fire side of things. I don't know that we're gonna get much of a change in that. So that's kind of the update right now. The sheriff's department, will not occupy, that site until early, 26, so I'm not sure when their expected timeframe to get in there will be. Number 6, reduce the turnout time intervals. With the move to 3.0 staffing, so update, we gave the response on that. Station layout to improve turnout time will be evaluated during the conceptual design phase. We added all that into the design of the station. Additional training, turnout drills, all have become a big priority for all of our personnel. And excuse me, finally, with the expected turnover reserve firefighters, our ability to become reliably proficient is something that we're constantly striving on. So with the 3.0 staffing, we've been very consistent with that. With the reserve firefighters being on shifts, the turnout times have improved significantly. Probably a 20 to 30-second improvement from those numbers that we saw 3 years ago. So pretty significant change there. Evaluate staffing levels required for administrative support services. So the response budget includes all cost allocation plans that will be used to determine the breakdown in the allocation of administrative expenses. The administrative allocation, so update has been, have seen a significant increase as the board knows and the committee knows, going from in 2022 132,000 to now 341,000, 150%, 158% increase. Let's see. Item 9.
Some of that has to do with, we changed some of the allocations.
We changed the formula.
Well, no, I know we changed the formula, but also we included some additional, right?
Yeah, you've done a couple things. So we modified the formula a couple years ago, and then last year you actually excluded some of the fire costs from the formula, which provided a small savings for the current year. And going forward, move safer, related expenses.
Thank you.
Number 9, review and develop contingency plans for areas prone to flooding. That's all within our LHMP, and the response is there on that. 10, combination career volunteer fire department adopt NFPA 20 in response, but my recommendations were the adoption of NFPA 1710. Update. Since the implementation of the safer positions and consistent 3.0 staffing, compliance with NFPA 1710 has been accomplished. This, however, will be diminished when we lose our safer positions. Depending upon what model we go with, you know, it's still going to be diminished. 11, no real update there. That's the include total staffing on incidents. 12, review the analysis related to the impact of career staff after a more extended time period. The response was staff will review and report on data annually. We've been doing that through our annual report. And then our current annual report has captured the positive impact of our career staff. So we've seen, you know, better improvements on staff safety, turnover of our reserve firefighters, on scene work being produced with regards to fires, vehicle accidents, those types of things that are more labor intensive. And then honestly, being able to go out of county and those types of things have been a significant impact for us also. 13, acquire a new Type 1 engine. Again, as I just mentioned, we're looking to go back in March on that. That's been purchased, so you know the update on that one.
Interesting to see the cost of it. 725,000.
Yeah, wound up being, 1,004,000. Yeah,
That's without any equipment on it, that's just. the
yeah,
engine,
then we
not-
still have to add about 250,000 worth of equipment. Review all fire department current alarm assignments, so we've been doing that on an annual basis, automatic mutual aid. We do that with each chief on a regular basis. 15, develop comprehensive pre-incident action plan, so those are still being worked on, and they're actually get revised more often because we have businesses kind of turnover on a regular basis, so they get revised quite frequently. Plus we're looking at software to incorporate that into, and we just had Tablet Command come online. So we're gonna be able to take all that information and plug it into Tablet Command, which is a new software system that will enhance those pre-plan abilities significantly. 16, establish an internal fire department safety committee. That's part of, and our response was recommending incorporating it into the district wide. That's been done. 17, consider utilizing funds generated via ordinance 2002-3 for the fire station expansion. Again, that's been accomplished, the fire station expansion. It's been discussed and approved by the board. We will go, as soon as we get that set of plans and approved, and a permit in hand, we'll go out to bid and find out what those actual costs are. 18 and 19 have no updates. And then it gets into the long-term, the midterm and long-term goals.
What is the ordinance 2007-3?
So those really related to the impact fees that were established by the district. We did do a comprehensive fire impact fee study after after the complete master plan was done, including apparatus expenses and the facility expenses, and you've essentially totally recalculated the impact fees for fire.
But
They no longer are in effect.
But the impact, I mean, how does that relate to the apparatus needs?
Oh, because those fees at the time were tied to specific pieces of apparatus.
I see.
They were, one had us actually tied to aerial apparatus, and the board made the decision that at that point that with our staffing, we can't adequately fund and train on an aerial apparatus.
We were also setting aside, essentially the setting aside funds for a second fire station. That's what the other ordinance was. So they're no longer, we did collect funds for those, but we've established a new development impact fee program tied to the current master plan.
All right, thank you. All right. Thank you for that update, appreciate it.
There's, anyhow, this is, there's a value to this document now and going forward.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Any questions from public? Great, all right. Coming back, so that's great. Next item is updated draft of fiscal year 26-27 fund projection. Is that Natalie?
I just want to give you a little context because this is, we reviewed with the committee here just, I guess it's been 3 weeks, but it seems like it happened super quick. Some financial analysis associated with several staffing models going forward. At your last committee meeting, you reviewed a kind of down and dirty projection for next year with the current model. If we kept all the same personnel but no longer had safer funding, what would that do? We compared that to the Measure A staffing levels, which is essentially your default position. That's what our budget right now is based on. After the safer grant ends, you would revert to, we have funding that would revert to the Measure A staffing. You evaluated an option that would maintain 2 full-time employees, two full-time personnel staffing on all shifts as an alternate to Measure A. And then you reviewed like 3 other options that had sort of part-time or contract arrangement, fire administration with a little more money going towards firefighter, scheduled firefighters and reserve programs, et cetera. But at the time, we hadn't done any real forecasting for next year other than on the salary, wage side. And so what we've done for this meeting, I was hoping to be able to make more progress, but the date you selected or the date you were available was the first date we offered. And so, which is nice, we're gonna have this meeting out of the way, but it didn't give us a whole lot of time to prepare. So what we put together here, and I wanna just, again, also frame this, you adopted in the strategic plan a goal that read, and I'm paraphrasing, that we would compare the pros and cons of eliminating the reserve program in order to maintain the two additional full-time engineer positions that we added as a part of the SAFER grant. And so the calculations we'll review with you today are really two options for fiscal year 26-27. The first being, what do things look like under the Measure A level of staffing? And the second being this second alternative, which would eliminate the reserve program and shift funds to two full-time engineers that would allow you to have two full-time employees on every shift, but no more reserve program. And again, pre-SAFER, when I say Measure A staffing, what that was a full-time captain on every shift. One of the three shifts had a full-time engineer. The other two shifts, in lieu of the engineer, had what we called at the time an apparatus operator. Somebody who was hopefully capable of driving the equipment and operating the fire engine. And then during the daytime, not 24 hours a day, we had another reserve firefighter. So really 2 people on 24 hours a day. 2/3 of the time, that second person was a reserve firefighter with limited experience, typically. And then during the daytime, 12 hours a day, we had a third person. So during the daytime, we had 3 person. Reserve firefighter.
limited experience. Limited training.
So that's what, when I say Measure A level of staffing, that's what it's based on. So we were able to go through these projections and update them, not just sort of carry forward what this year's budget looked like, but updated our forecasts for interest, miscellaneous income. Miscellaneous income, by the way, is a very volatile figure. This, in the past, it's included income associated with out-of-county fires. These examples include none for out-of-county fires. And then in the second example, this option 1, if you will, it's doubtful that we would be able to participate in out-of-county assignments unless we're able to secure kind of a partnership with another agency to be able to staff an engine to go. There'd be limited opportunities. So we've got miscellaneous income, San Luis ambulance cell site. You'll see these are going to be the same under both models. We updated the property tax forecast. So this is now our forecast for property taxes for fire based on the present split that the district receives. We've inflated that figure. We estimated the increase associated with Measure A. And then weed abatement is essentially a pass-through. If this number gets higher, it's because there was more weeds to abate, and hopefully that meant we collected more weed abatement funds. But this is so this number is a swag at this point. So that's the revenue that's available, and again, it's the same under both options. You'll see again, this is the measure. This is the option 1. So this option that's listed here. Hopefully that means the second one is Measure A. This is the alternative that would maintain 2 full-time personnel on every shift, a captain and an engineer on every shift. But you'll see here, there's no money for reserve firefighters. That program is essentially the funds that were available for that program get shifted into full-time employees to cover these to cover those costs. We've estimated all the benefit-related costs for this program. Estimated overtime. This again is a fairly volatile figure. That's not going to be the number. We're going to miss it because we don't know exactly how many illnesses or vacations there will be to cover. It's not hard to estimate the overtime that's associated with the shift assignments, but it's the coverage that is much more volatile. And then we inflated all of the expenses Many of them are gonna be the same under both the Measure A model and this model. However, there are some expenses that are different. For example, if we don't have a reserve program, the cost for physicals will go way down. There'll be a little bit of savings in education and training, et cetera. And so you can see that, that this, again, this is a very early, prediction, but the fund total ends up being about $65,000 in the hole. It's a deficit, against that year's, projected revenue. Under the Measure A model, you, again, the same forecast for expenses, or I'm sorry, for revenues. There's differences here because again, this does not include the 2 additional full-time engineers. The overtime is a little bit lower, but you've got a pretty big expense associated with reserve firefighters. This also includes funding to continue to do a Templeton specific academy, about 800 hours for training for those folks. It's pretty significant investment that we make in bringing those folks on board, et cetera.
And keep in mind, we see a rotation of usually not more than 1.5 years, 2 years before we're doing another one.
Yeah, sometimes much quicker than that.
Much quicker. We've done them every 6 months on occasion. So.
Yeah, it's about, we added that in from the version that was before you last time, because it's just an obvious need. And this was assuming we'd be bringing on 5 new firefighters twice a year. So about 800 hours in training before they're on shift. So this alternative has about $47,000 deficit spending. Under this Measure A alternative, we could continue to participate in some limited out of county assignments. So those revenues and associated expenditures, would vary perhaps more under this alternative if again those options were available. So this is not the pros and cons. It's just a financial look. You spent some time discussing some of the benefits of a full-time, having 2-person reliable staff members at your last meeting, and I wanted to provide you our best or very early estimate of what those costs would be under these 2 scenarios. Now, keep in mind, I don't have the other scenarios because they're really dependent on if in fact we can have a partnership opportunity and what that cost looks like, somewhat out of our control. We labeled some of those alternatives as having like a part-time fire chief. And we succeeded in that in the past, but the pool is small. The opportunities are limited, and we don't know if that would be a successful model going forward. In other words, could we find somebody to work as a part-time employee in that capacity? These are options I think that you have control over. The others less so.
I mean, it would be same for both scenarios, but.
The CFD revenue comes in as a transfer, and it's really been committed, if you recall, you committed to doing so to cover the new engine depreciation. So that expense is not shown here, so we haven't shown the revenue for the CFD.
And that hasn't grown that much to go beyond that.
I mean, it will grow certainly from a CPI perspective each year because it has a floor of 2% and a ceiling of 6%, but there have not been very many new facilities built. Now we have, for example, the development that's occurring on North Main Street, north of the post office. That's now, we've seen that go vertical. That parcel is in the CFD, but it's unlikely those buildings will be done in time to be assessed for next year. It's probably 2 years out.
And and then those are commercial, so that's per square foot, right?
Yes,
They're mixed use.
they're both.
Commercial and
Oh, okay. Do we have an estimate how much it is?
I don't recall. It's probably not enough to change any of your.
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah, and then the hotel, which was completed recently, that is not in a CFD.
Okay. For the property tax, we get a little bit.
We should, and I just want to continue to kind of caution, or maybe just state from a conservative standpoint, I'm continuing to forecast the property taxes without Twin Cities Hospital, what's now known as Adventist Health Twin Cities.
Yeah.
That has not yet caught up on the county's books. The county, we are still shown to get that revenue, but we've been advised that once it's approved, there'll be a clawback of the revenue, of the property tax revenue that the special districts received. Because they're expected to get nonprofit status back to the date of acquisition, which was, I believe, was March 31st, 2024.
And are we setting that money aside?
Well, we've not budgeted for it, but it's in our accounts. So when you look at like the fire fund balance, that includes that
Okay,
property taxes received.
maybe, I guess, let us know how much that is. It seems like it's adding up.
Yeah,
so-
I mean, it's like, we're in it for like $120,000 or something right now. I mean, if you have 2 fiscal years.
Yeah.
The last year, this year, and then, several months of that 2024 fiscal year period. So, of course, that would be divided amongst multiple district funds, Parks and Recreation, streetlights, and fire. Again, if and when that happens, it's a little frustrating because we're a year, almost 2 years into this purchase, and it still hasn't kind of been cleaned up.
And then, as you mentioned, the biggest difference between option 1 and 2, which is option 2 being the Measure A staffing, is that we still have an opportunity to go out of county assignments.
Yeah, from a financial standpoint, I think there are differences in the operations for sure. I think but what's presented here is option 1 is as it stands, probably doesn't have an out of county component unless we're able to secure a partnership with somebody else to allow us to sort of team up and share resources on an engine. Measure A, we were participating in out of county assignments when we were Measure A staff. It's still not a perfect, that's still a very limited resource. There's a limited number of resources available. And so in order for us to participate in out of county assignment, we've got to ensure that there's not only the personnel available to go to that assignment at that moment, but also the folks available to cover the district for 14, 21, this year, about 30 days.
And keep in mind, I would not recommend under that second model, sending certain crews out. Because they're gonna be in situations where you might have a brand new driver operator. Well, that means the captain has to drive, on the out of county assignment, not that that's unheard of. But it does provide kind of an added component to that captain at that point in time. And then the likelihood of a 12-hour reserve firefighter being available if we get called out at 3 a.m. There's a lot of factors in there that have to mash and come together to be able to send an out of county assignment, even on that one. So I think, honestly, even with both of them, there's probably that 50-50 chance that we could get a program together with the Tascadero and use their seasonals to augment our out of county staffing, or, second guess our reserves going out.
I apologize for not being at the last meeting, but in both of these include a full-time fire chief that's still doing all the prevention and administration and everything here.
Yes.
In both of these scenarios.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
Yes, they do.
okay.
Yes.
Even
These two do. We don't have financial modeling for the sort of partnership scenarios because we don't yet know whether that option really exists. There's a limited, or what the price tag is. We did review some very preliminary items at the last committee meeting. Essentially, what it allowed you to do is shift, if in fact that materializes, then you could shift the funds that you were spending on that into either bolstering the reserve program or, adding reserves back into the mix, so to speak.
So I'm sorry, I did miss that on this. So option 1 does provide for a full-time chief,
That's the same option as we had option.
and then
one.
the 2-0 staffing.
Yes.
Okay.
Public, any comment? One, come back. All right, so this was an update. Yeah, I guess,
Well, we're
figure
really,
out what the Tascadero is gonna do, and then.
yeah, we may end up having to, we're in a position where our current safer grant lapses in mid-February. So your budget does not maintain funding for all the people we have on schedule after February, there's reduced funding that's included in the budget. So sometimes now in February, a decision has to be made about whether or not we're gonna revert to Measure A or pursue some other option. We may or may not know whether a Atascadero partnership is viable that quickly. We may have to pivot a couple of times in the coming months in order to make this all possible. Or you'd have to alter the budget to include additional funding to keep the level of staffing that we've had beyond mid-February. We'll just run out of funds before the end of the year if we don't. So you have a couple months to make up, to kind of make up your mind. Again, our budget is based on the calculations that make up the budget revert to the Measure A level of staffing. I guess I'd say if you want to keep other options alive, or you want to pursue like what's listed here is option one. Again, this is just financial. This is missing the important stuff is, you know, the real benefits of either level. As compared to one another, if one of these options are you have control over, right? We currently employ a full-time fire chief. We currently employ these folks. We can pick between one of these two for mid-February, and we need to do so before mid-February in order to implement it. The Atascadero options are probably something that would occur later, like mid-year or later, if in fact it's deemed viable. Say mid-year, maybe for the next fiscal year. So yeah, we can keep studying these. We can, but I guess what other information, maybe it'd be helpful just to go to visit the item 5 and then come back to item 4 real quick, because we were kind of waiting to see and if safer funding was still in the mix.
Right, it is a totally different, safer anyways.
It's a totally different safer.
Yeah, and just to jump forward on that, safer from the email that Natalie got, they've awarded all of their safer grants for the year. Those that haven't received anything apparently didn't get them. So, and we have received no notification.
So, I mean, are you asking us if you wanna?
Yeah,
Direction in terms of taking this to the board?
yeah, well,
Or
are
just-
you prepared to, does the committee have a recommendation they should go to the board based on what you know now? Or are there further details that you'd like the committee to review before this goes to the board? I mean, I think you'd have, the risk, you know, the board could make a decision as late as February. But really our funding for the 2 engineers that we hired because of safer lapses about that time. Mid-February, that's when the 3 years is up. And, you know, based on everything we know now, there won't be more safer funds coming to us. Or our application was not awarded.
Yeah, from what I recall, when we did approve the safer grant, the board as a general was very clear that that would be it, that we would not be interested in changing or moving away from Measure A unless something significant happens. And I'm glad to see the showing us the fact that reserves, if what happens with the reserve program goes away versus having more permanent positions available. So that's great, but it's still, I mean, both of them have deficit spending, and unfortunately we've already in the deficit spending, we've started that last budget year. So I mean, that option one makes things even worse. So
yeah, I mean, on the good news side, since Measure A was approved, we've been able to save about $400,000 in this sort of future fire fund.
Yeah.
So we can weather some deficits, but depending on what happens going forward, that that's just a few years.
yeah, I think, I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm obviously okay with taking it to the board level, at least right now, my inclination is wait to see what the Atascadero would offer to.
So again, I wanna,
Yeah.
so I think the Atascadero model, we have to look at as something that's like 6 months out or longer. It's before it would be implemented. I suppose if you had a great deal of confidence that it was gonna be a lower cost option and you were gonna be able to pick, another model, then you could, sort of wait for it to kind of to take effect and eat some costs for a shorter period of time, but I'm not certain, we may know with certainty that Atascadero is not an option in January. I don't know that you'll know that it's viable that soon. You may know that you're still at the table talking about it. Because we won't have a deal worked out that quickly, certainly. So I think you're gonna have to make a decision with, less than perfect information. But we'd be happy to try to outline, other, again, I think these are the two options that you
Yeah.
have total control of.
Yeah.
You have a full-time fire chief, we have control of how we model. I think what you heard at the last committee meeting is the fire chief, if it's between these two options, would prefer the one that's labeled option one, where you have full-time staffing on the engine. Just realize there are pros and cons for both alternatives. And there are other ways to sort of skin the cat, but they become a little more, a little more complicated in terms of the part-time fire chief or contract for some of those services.
No, it's a cost for both the deficits for it. I mean, ideally, option we would go down the route to explore that and how we would be able to finance that. Kind of have the rough numbers, but we just have to figure out how we get out of that deficit.
I mean, obviously option one is ideal.
Yes.
Well, I don't know.
Well, not ideal.
Call it ideal.
Yeah.
Two-
The two.
2.0 staffing is not ideal. I mean, that's a significant deficit with regards to safety of personnel and again, safety on the fire ground. We would not meet an FPA 1710 even with option one. We won't meet it with Measure A. So the only way we've been meeting it is with the safer.
Yeah. But that would mean that,
And
I mean, if we wanna be going that route, like similar to what Safer is, that's another additional $250,000 a year, which obviously we don't have, so.
Yeah.
We gotta figure out what we could do, so. I mean, I'd like to hear from you,
Yeah,
have expertise in all this
Well,
different
I-
models and.
I mean, the current county deployment is 2-person staffing, and it certainly isn't ideal. And they're able to bring more resources to bolster up those incidents, and so that's where they have a little bit of, more of an advantage, but, we are surrounded by other fire agencies that would be able to support. I think I would be in favor of supporting the chief's recommendation of option one, just because we know that the difficulty with the second option is that although it's really great for the reserve firefighters and it's good for the community, because it's that rotation, we're putting a lot of money out that's leaving and going to other agencies, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think for the firefighters here, on the consistency and the safety and their ability to train together, I think in the interim, I mean, for most media, I think it's the best option. Hoping that, as there's more development, possibly there's, greater property taxes or something changes that, gives some money where even if you're able to grow a seasonal firefighter program to maybe even a limited seasonal program where you have the ability to send folks out and be able to get some, additional money. So the unfortunate thing about the mutual aid system is it just depends, if you have a big fire season, you're out a lot, you're gonna be able to bring more revenue in. But if you spend that money on that person and you don't send out a lot of folks, you may not be able to recoup your money back. And so under the current numbers, and even though it's some deficit spending, I think that the option one, I would feel the most comfortable with that if I had to make that decision. not trying to take anything, because I know we got some reserve firefighters here, and it's a great program, it's a great program. And it's limited, I don't think there's, I don't know who else has reserve firefighters.
Think we're the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think they have volunteers, of some sort, or some stipend in Margarita, but even they're really struggling getting people.
Yeah, I don't know, if we could somehow sharpen our pencil, as they say, and figure out, find some more money somewhere. I know we looked at previously and we were able to bring in some money with the sell side revenue and things like that, but. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to give you today, at least like, hey, you know, this is a, you know, at least an educated guess at what next fiscal year looked like if you were operating under this model. And I think we've built in, you know, the appropriate sort of cushions since it's such an early forecast. But I don't expect a silver bullet to come our way. And I also just continue to, we made some choices, you know, nearly 10 years ago now about how we were going to try to overcome these costs, like the development of the community facilities district program and whatnot, and we implemented those. We've really had about 5 years without development in this community, with very little development, and the development that has occurred, like the hotel, was entitled before that program. Will we get another batch or round? It's unpredictable. It's not in the short term, for sure. It's not in the next couple of years, because it's the money lags. We wouldn't receive funds until the building were occupied, not just under construction. So again, if you saw something start now, the first dollars you might receive would be in November or December of 2027 at the earliest.
So, and just, I'm curious, so with Twin Cities going to a nonprofit, the previous property tax on that is now gonna be, it's gonna be pulled back, you said that.
Yeah, so Twin Cities was our largest single property tax payer in the district. So our estimate is a loss of about 55,000 a year. It's significant.
You said we have about 400,000 in our reserve fund?
We do in our future fire operating fund.
Which,
Yeah.
100 of it approximately is going back to, Adventist Hospital? Or is that?
So, yeah, maybe 100, I was
Okay.
guessing maybe like, 120,000, so 72% of that, and maybe 90 of it would.
So that means we approximately have 300,000. So, I mean, even with either one is, if we're doing deficit spending, right?
Both the options are,
So one is
you
4
know,
years, the measure A, we have enough, maybe 4 years, and 4.5 years, the other one is 3 years. So
yeah, now, again, we haven't trued up this year's funds. You remember, we participated in the whole month of out of county assignments that brought in some funds that we haven't yet realized. There'll be a surplus this year unless something crazy goes.
But I mean, still, that being said, and all that, I mean, we have enough fund for like 5 or 6
Right,
years.
well, that's if again, I can't believe it's been this long, but in 2019, we modeled what measure it would look like, and it said we could probably fund the fire department for 10 years.
Yeah.
We're about to enter year 7
Yeah.
of that, and so, yeah, it's gonna make it, we'll get through 10 years.
That's-
Don't know how much, I don't know how much longer it'll carry us at these expenditure levels, and our other revenues have not
I don't know.
grown quicker than anticipated.
I mean, I remember when we did that model, we were supposedly being really conservative on the CFD fund, but apparently we weren't conservative enough.
Well, no, we still beat them. I think it had like 75,000 coming in, but there just hasn't been, we will get more CFD funds. It's just not gonna hit next year. Cause that, in order for it to hit next year, the building would have to be completed this spring. And I shouldn't say there'll be none. There might be an ADU or something, but there are no major projects that are wrapping up that are in the CFD that are in the short term sort of pending. There are several projects under review, but they're not under construction. Lots and lots of projects come through, lots and lots of projects that look really pretty on paper and never get built. And that's not Templeton exclusive, that happens everywhere.
Okay, I mean, I guess we should take this to the board, because obviously February is coming up, so if the board decides that they wanna change it, and then maybe we'll sit down and try to figure out, I mean, either case, we've gotta figure out where we could get more money, so we have to get really serious, so.
And have you seen, like year to year, is the property tax went up that much with the resale of, residents? I mean, doesn't seem like there's a lot of houses on the market.
So we inflated this by 4%, it's 4 or 5, I mean, it's still a fairly conservative number, I mean, it might be a little low, if it's a good turnover year. But now, now we're maybe house values are flat or falling a little bit, or who knows?
Yeah.
But interest rates are supposedly gonna go down and people are gonna buy again, that happens, that could be an improvement. But there isn't a lot of, the stuff you can bank on would be the development that you can see going up, right?
Yeah, you need like 300 or 400 home development type of thing. I mean, unfortunately, we only get 8% of the property taxes, so it's
Yeah, so look, if a house was assessed at $500,000 and it sells now for $1 million, it gets reassessed at $1 million, we're gonna get,
not that much.
yeah, $4,000 more. Well, not even that, 400.
400.
Yeah, $400 more, sorry.
400, yeah.
Half of that, about,
Yeah.
yeah, 4.3% of the growth, or 4.3% of the new value.
Yeah. So it's not, it's just, it takes,
It takes
I think we need to look at some annexation and bringing in some development.
So, yeah, so you're, the next board meeting that we're working on now is in January. If you, obviously we can continue to add to the mix, if you think that we should, you're ready to bring this forward to the board, we can incorporate the financial forecast with more of a written pros and cons. That's really what the goal stated, kind of more of a written pros and cons. Some of those were discussed at your last meeting, but I'd like to end up with a kind of a more comprehensive, something that's, sort of documented about what the benefits are, what the drawbacks are of each, because there's just, there's there's, for example, losing the reserve program, is a loss to us in terms of our ability to staff up for certain things, and then I think it's gonna be difficult to bring it back.
And also,
If we ever wish to going forward.
and even for example, it affects our July 4th response as well, right?
Just how many people we could possibly employ on a
Because we
certain
don't
day.
have that, all those reserve programs gone, so we don't have that. Because how many did we have this past 4th? Like 10 people?
I think
or
we had
8
10 people on
Yeah, so
duty.
we won't have that. So,
If we lost the reserve program, we wouldn't have
and
it.
we're talking about enforcement and having our, people out there, we'll even have less people. So this is all affects.
It's all consequential.
Consequential. Okay, I think it's good just to bring these two, the other ones, since they're not, for sure with the Atascadero, so I don't see a point having discussed those till we know for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're conceptually still possible, but I guess I wanna say, to a certain extent, they're out of your hands, right? You can't force a partnership, so, these are the ones that you have available to you.
And then how difficult is it if we do this, can we get rid of reserve program and then do this and say, okay, in a year it's not working out, or 2 years it's not working out, how difficult is it to get the reserve program back going again?
I think we would have some challenges.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to keep it going than it is to limit and start it up over again. That being said, it's, maybe more difficult over time, just in general.
And keep in mind, it is becoming more challenging. I mean, just on the applications, personnel, the revolving door.
Is it are we keeping about 10 or so people on reserve?
So we're only about 6 or 7 right now. Yeah. I think we've got 7 right now. And we literally kind of dodged a bullet last month because we could have lost 2 more. And we would have had 2 shifts that would have been out. They would have been running 2 of them on every other.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we can bring this forward to the board for a review in January. It will include not only the financial side, but really the pros and cons of at least these two models, and acknowledge that there are others that can still follow, right? I mean, in other words, you can still pivot further, but for February.
Okay, so. Ask public comment on this item? I can't remember, any public, I just wanna make sure, any public comments on this item? No, okay. Right, okay, so next we have already discussed safer grant application.
Yeah.
Okay, fire station expansion.
So the fire station expansion, we did get the comments back from the county. There's about 34 items, that they commented on. The good news is that they are all very benign items, except for one or two. And I've already talked to our architect, and most of these are just notations on the plans. They do have some questions with regards to why do we need two electrical, or justify two electrical services to one structure. That's easy enough, and Toma will help take care of that. The other aspect was the drainage and sedimentation and erosion control plan. We don't really have one because our on-site work is going to be of such a nature that the existing contour is going to take care of it. So we're going to see what they want from that. The other aspect was provide topographical features. We don't have any, we're flat. So that type of stuff is the type of stuff that was indicated. So I don't see this taking too long. Supervisor Pashong's office has reached out to us and indicated if we need any help on this to let them know. But that's kind of it right now. We were looking to resubmit with corrections, all the corrections answered in less than a couple weeks.
And then hopefully that should be even a quicker response on this time, right?
Yeah, it better be.
And I'm glad that they responded so quickly. It was just like, I know they were talking about 6 months, so. Yeah, that'll be 3 or 4 months, so that's good. All right, good.
Something like this.
That's great news, thank you. Any questions, comments? No? Okay,
Good
public,
update.
public, any questions? All right. Thank you, Chief, for working on that, appreciate it. All right, and then the last, that's it. I guess we discussed future items.
Yeah, I just wanted to, so again, the makeup of this committee may change in January. I just to remind the committee members, the board president will make appointments of board members to committees on January 20th. And then citizen members will also be appointed by the board on January 20th. So if there's any citizens who are willing to continue to serve or wish to serve, please let us know so you can be appointed in January. So if there's a future item that you would like to review, we would need to get that meeting scheduled pretty quickly. If it's a committee item for the committee, no matter what the makeup is, we can list it and cover it after the committee is confirmed.
And honestly, on the future item, I would really like to know what the committee's flavor is with regards to spending time, my remaining time, because my last day will be July 10th. Yeah. And so spending the time that I have left, putting information together with regards to a potential new measure for paramedic services or some other type of funding measure. I'm more than willing to put that work in.
Well, I mean, based on what we see, that we're already in the deficit, deficit spending, and obviously we need to raise our revenue somehow, so. And if we, I don't know what the pleasure of the board is, whether they want to, do the ballot or not, but obviously we need some things. But that's some, I guess, do we decide that at the committee level or bring it to the board?
Well, I mean, the board's already established some goals to review pros and cons and costs of like adding paramedics and those kinds of things. They're gonna be above and beyond this deficit, really, if we, either of the two models you looked at here are still rather fragile, that those are not, necessarily long-term successes for the district, and they're maybe financially doable, but there's more to it than just converting one of those persons to paramedic. I think in terms of developing a long-term sustainable staffing model that includes paramedics. So.
Yeah.
So
I mean, just coincidentally though, I don't know whether because the property tax notices came out or what, but I've got like 3 complaints over the last month about how much property taxes have gone up because, the school, was added and then obviously as soon as they say, oh, well, we got school and now we got, we have the fire department, so fire department's only $200. But so it's gonna be, it's unfortunate that we have to compete with that. I guess we have to.
Well, and everybody we talk to says the same thing. You don't need us until you need us, and then you really need us.
So I'm open to looking at, some of like how it would all work, what the estimates would be, costs and what we need to do like that. And I know like previously when we did Measure A, we had a consultant, right, that went out to get a little bit of sampling.
we've hired a couple of different times. We hired did some survey work.
Yeah.
But you kind of need to know what questions you're asking. In other words, probably need to know what the cost, what that theoretical amount would be, so they could survey to that. We did that about in 2016, and then again in 2018.
Yeah.
So the first time the survey responses were not favorable towards moving forward. And then we spent a couple years educating folks and fine tuning our figures, and then surveyed again in 2018. And that was the time that the district board decided that there wasn't a favorable response to consider moving forward more formally, and then ultimately engaged in the proceeded with Measure A.
It was part of our strategic plan as well, getting that started. And obviously having your expertise while you're here, great. Okay, any other questions? Public, any questions? Okay, great, thank you, all right, and that's it, so meeting adjourned.